All right, guys, I'm gonna kind of go over this homework again that we had started on, and some of you still need to finish. So I'm just gonna talk about what you need to do on each section. The main thing is understanding slopes, especially in relationship to parallel and perpendicular lines. Now, in this first section here, on 1 through 6, they have given you the graph. So in order, excuse me, sorry, in order to find the slope, this is when we're going to count our rise over run. So we need to have 2 points on the line. And if you look here on number 1, I read our graphs left to right. So this is the first point. I'm going to label that A. And this is my second point. That's going to be B. So I'm going to count from A to B. And we're counting our rise. That's our vertical up and down. And then our run is left to right. So if I look here, let me change the color here. From point A to B, I would have to rise up. If I look 1, 2, 3, 4 units, so that's positive 4, and then a run to the right 2. So the rise was 4 over the run of 2. And this can be simplified by dividing 4 over 2, or 4 divided by 2 as your slope of just 2. Now, if you want to write it as a fraction 2 over 1, that's acceptable as well. Okay, so make sure you start with your pencil on the point. Okay, like on number 2, here's the first point A, and then we're going to B. That means here we would go down to get to even with B, and because we're going in down, that's a negative. So this is a -3, and then to the right is positive versus to the left is negative. So here, this would be to the right 5. And so this slope would be -3/5. And we can see that this is a negative slope because the line is decreasing. When lines increase, like 1 and 3, it's positive slope. When it decreases, it's a negative slope. Then, of course, you need to remember your special cases. The line is actually right here where the arrows are. And those of you who had me last year, we talked about OI bucks, okay, BUX. H is for horizontal, that's like number 6 here, okay. So when it's horizontal, it's a 0 slope, and it's y equal the y coordinate. When V is for vertical, like number 4 here, and when it's vertical, it's an undefined slope. So these are just facts you have to remember. So 4 is undefined versus 6, the slope is 0 because it's horizontal. Now, when you get to 7 through 12 here, you're given 2 points, and we're going to have to use your slope formula, y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. If you need to label your points, the coordinates here, let me just change my font. This is the first -1 here is your x1. Your -11 is your y1. Sorry, that's supposed to be y1. Then this is the second coordinate, at -6 is your x2, and -7 is your y2. So all we're doing at this point is substituting the values in the formula. This should be -7 minus a -11 over -6 minus -1. And we talked about just putting the expression in the calculator. So remember, if you go alpha x, we get straight to our fraction box here. I probably need to make this a little bit smaller. Let me make this smaller, sorry. There we go. Okay. Maybe a little too small. And so all we're needing to do is to type this expression into calculator. So -7 minus a -11 is on top. Then we arrow down, -6 minus a -1. We enter, and it will simplify our ratio for us, our fraction for us. Okay. So you're doing the formula that we have here for problem 7 through 12. When we get to this section, we're going to find the slope of each line and then determine if they're parallel. If it's parallel, it will be the same slope, meaning the same number. Okay. If it's perpendicular, it will have an opposite reciprocal slope. I'm just going to abbreviate that, sorry. Meaning we're going to flip the number and we have to change the sign. That's the opposite part. And then neither means it doesn't have either one of those relationships. So on a problem like number 13 here, we're going to start off with PQ. These are the first two points. Find the slope of PQ. We're putting in slope formula, a -1 minus -4 over -7 minus -9. And then we're just going to simplify, like work this out. This ends up coming out to be 3 over 2. Then we're finding the slope of our S using the slope formula. This will be -1 minus 5 over -6 minus a -2. This reduces also to 3 over 2. So we had 3 over 2 and 3 over 2. Sorry. Since they're both the same, then our answer here is that the lines are parallel, and that's our symbol for parallel. So you're continuing comparing the two lines on the back. We're still using the slope formula. We're still doing y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1, and then comparing. So if you look on 14 here, I'm just gonna recap. Hold on just a second. All right, so we use this formula to find the slope of PQ. So I kind of went ahead and checked to see if you got to this. And then we're doing the same thing, same formula for the slope of RS. So when I set that up, that should be 4 minus 3 on the top, and then a -5 minus -9. This gets simplified as 1 over 4. And then because these are opposite reciprocals, because remember your 4 is like saying 4 over 1. And then when I flip it, it would be 1 over 4, and I change the sign. So these lines are perpendicular. And you can put the upside down T as the symbol. Now, when you get to this last section, 17 through 20, you're going to have to do some problem solving. We kind of talked about this today in class. They're going to give you some key information to help us problem solve. So on this first one, like 17, the fact that they tell us right here that they're parallel, that I want to use same slope to problem solve. Now, of the 4 points here, because we're trying to find x, which is part of C, we need to start with actually finding the slope, of EF. Fix that. So if I look at my slope of EF using the slope formula, that would be 14 minus the -4 and -6 minus 2. This would get simplified, as 18 over the -8. I'm using the right point. Oh, I set this up wrong. I'm sorry. It's y2 minus y1. Sorry about that. The y2 is here, the 4. So it's 4 minus 14, and then -2 minus -6. So that is the -10. That becomes +4. So -5 over 2. So we're using this slope to help find the x in the CD. So if I use the setup for our point CD, this would be -4 minus 16 on top, and then 2 minus x on the bottom. If I simplify and do my math, the -4 minus 16, this comes out to be a -20 over my 2 minus x. So I'm going to talk about different ways of working this out. So we know it has to have the same slope, so it has to be a -5 over 2. So one thing I could do is say, oh, well, let's look how the numbers changed, right? We have basically a 20 on top that we have to reduce to get to this 5/2, right? So what I would need to do is kind of divide by 4 or multiply by 4. So if I do the inverse, if I do times 4 here, that means this bottom number has to be an 8. because a negative 20 over 8 would reduce to taking for a negative 5 over 2. So that means this 2 minus x is equal to 8. And I can now just use this equation to solve for the variable. Another way of doing this, and I'll show you here, is if I know it's a negative 20 over 2 minus x, and we know it's same slope, so negative 5 over 2, then you could just cross multiply. That's me trying to show, doing the butterfly method. Cross multiply and solve that way. Now, another way, and I'll show you on number 18, is just use your graph. Like, to me, the graph here is very powerful because if I know the lines are parallel, so like we're trying to find this missing x, and I know I have the line L here, and I can literally count my rise over run. So I'm like coming up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So the rise of 6 over 2. So 6 over 2 reduces to 3. That's my slope. Well, I have a given point K, and these lines are parallel. So if I just start with my given point, which was a negative 1, negative 5, and I keep the same slope. So I'm doing my rise over run. So I'm counting up 6, and then to the right 2. Okay. So we're trying to find what the x coordinate would be if I had a negative 8 y coordinate. So that means I'm going to continue down, and I'm running out of space here. But on a situation like this, if the graph is bigger, I could just continue down the line. And this is my line. Let me give it a color here. I could just continue down and find the point on the line. But since we don't have enough room on the graph here, we're going to use our 6 over 2 to equal our change in j to k. So that would be negative 5 minus the negative 8, and then negative 1 minus x. This right here gets simplified to 3. Okay, so basically I'm taking half. So half of 6 is 3. If I take half of 2 here, that would give this to be 1. So my negative 1 minus x has to equal to 1. And then we're solving for x. So you can use your graph to get to the point, or you can cross multiply, but you're going to have to work backwards, and you're going to have to do some problem solving to get this to this. So this needs to get done because this needs to be turned in tomorrow, and it correlates with your activity that you're going to do in class. All right, thanks, guys.